Welcome everybody to Private Provider 2024 presentation of the City of Miami Building Department. This workshop is designed to inform and assist you, our private provider community, to be more effective and productive while working with us here at the City of Miami. So thank you for being here. We even have a catchy subtitle for you. Today, I'm going to share with you some basic information that will help bridge the gap between your operations in the private sector and ours as an enforcement agency. Still, the element of time does not permit this presentation to be all-inclusive. Instead, we'll hear some important highlights today and direct you to sources of further detailed information. The presentation today has the following objectives. Naturally, we'll explain our policies and procedures. We want to offer guidelines and practical tips, promoting professionalism. We want to avoid unnecessary rejections and the all-important make your job easier and ours. For today, we have about 120 attendees at last count, give or take. Many of you are from outside our local area. We welcome you. We have a good cross-section of professionals in this meeting: private providers, architects, engineers, plan expediters, and building code officials from across Florida. And again, thank you to all for signing up, and thanks to those who submitted questions in advance. I think we covered most of your concerns in the presentation itself, but there will be some time for questions at the end. I hope the information shared will be useful. A word or two about your presenter. My name is John Corferi. Some of you already know me as the manager of the private provider program here at the City of Miami Building Department. You may also know that private provider activities are handled almost entirely within our quality control section. This means from your initial registration with the city throughout the project cycle. Inquiries and all business matters should be sent to privateprovider@miamigov.com, which is monitored by a specially trained staff. Assisting me today is Amy Jimenez, who will monitor your typed questions via the Teams chat. Now, you're probably familiar with Teams. There's a raise hand feature to ask questions. However, from past experience, I know this can slow down the presentation quite a bit, especially when we have a lot of information to convey to you. So please use the chat feature to type your questions as we go along, and I can answer them at the end, at which time we'll also have an open mic section as well. We expect the presentation to run about 1 hour, more or less. We'll see how that goes. As mentioned earlier, today's presentation covers many of the main points, but for more complete information, it can be found on our private provider acknowledgement. We call it the Form A4, and it's available on our website. We will put links to everything in the chat as we go along. Let me repeat here that our main point of contact is our email, privateprovider@miamigov.com. That is used for registration, sending out your NTBOs, communicating with permit technicians, and other general matters. For receiving all third-party inspection reports, I have another mailbox. That's for threshold building reports, special inspector reports, and private provider reports when you're authorized to send them. We have a special email, progress inspection@miamigov.com. Again, we'll put links to everything in the chat feature. Today's program will consist of 4 main parts. A general introduction, that's who we are as a department. We'll talk about our concept of the private provider management system. Next, we'll go into private provider practices for some useful information, such as registration, some general principles to go by, the election process, and plan review and inspection tips. After that, there's still more practical information, and we'll be focused on the details of the documents themselves, such as standard forms, and we do have an array of them. We'll talk about digital signatures, which is quite important, plan review requirements and inspection requirements as they relate to documentation. Lastly, and I suspect there will be some interest in how we approach the topic of quality assurance as it applies to our management of private provider projects and processes. I'll tell you about our quality control section, what we do. We'll tell you what we do with documents, and we'll tell you what we do in the field. Then finally, we'll do a closing segment, including taking some time for questions. That should be interesting. And let's move on. Let's begin with a quick update of what's going on here in Miami, and I do mean quick. Simply stated, our local construction market is still very strong, period. We're very, very busy. Being so busy, we have to realize a building department is not some abstract concept represented by an organizational chart. It's made up of people. So the names you see here are our leadership team. They work very hard to serve the citizens of our community. Let me bring in now Mr. Luis Torres, our building official, to speak further on that. Luis, are you with us?
Yes, I am, John, and thank you. Good morning. I want to welcome everyone here to our 2024 Private Provider Workshop. My name is Luis Torres. I am the building official for the department. For those that don't know me, I've been with the city for about 22 years. I've been the building official for the last 2 years. Prior to that, I was the chief building inspector. Having said that, it is no secret that we are experiencing an economic boom that we've never seen before. As a result, we're seeing development, construction at levels we've never seen before. So as a department, I think it's more important than ever before to really commit to simplifying the permitting process. Obviously, the private provider component is an extremely critical part of that. And throughout the presentation, there's going to be a recurring theme of common sense, applying common sense. And the reason for this is because we are living in complicated times. We have to be dealing with code changes all the time, annual changes in procedures, regulations. In addition to that, on your end in particular, the private providers have to deal with the county, countless municipalities. Everyone has different procedures, different processes. So really, and to make the matters more complex, right? The amount of volume that we're experiencing just makes everything all the more difficult. So as such, we believe that when you're dealing with a complex problem, the best solution is the simplest solution. So giving you some background on our senior staff for the building department here is, I can tell you that most of us have private sector experience, and we've been in your shoes. So we understand, and we're applying that understanding to our procedures. And this is why in part we're having this workshop. Okay, so basically, it is very important as part of that process is your feedback. Feedback is what lets us really understand what is happening and if what we're implementing is working or it's not working. So we want to hear from everyone here. It's very important, the good and the bad. We want to know, well, what's working, what's not. So if it's working, we can improve it. If it's not working, then we would have to somehow change it, fix it, get it to work. So again, it's all about, I think, working together. We're committing to partnering with all of you. And I believe in doing that and working together, it makes it easier for all of us, not just for us, but both sides. So having said that, again, I want to thank you all for participating. And without any further ado, I will turn it back over to John. So John.
Thank you, Louis. We'll move along. So you heard some very interesting remarks by Mr. Torres. Where are we today? Well, the alternative plans review and inspection process, or the law itself is complex, it's confusing, and private provider projects do require certain specialized administrative procedures, which will vary from one jurisdiction to another. Now, back in 2014, the City of Miami here developed a system of policies and procedures, including the use of standardized forms to manage the growing trend of using private providers for plan review and inspections. That was back in 2014. Think of where we are today. We're even more involved with the private provider process. So that led to the development of what I call the Private Provider Management Program that we've implemented here and have been using for a number of years. The main objective, after all, is to ensure full compliance with the applicable regulations, the laws, local ordinances, standard practices, the whole thing. So again, we are employing as much common sense as we can to do what we do. In this next segment that we call private provider practices, we'll get into some important concepts. We already spoke about a very important concept, and that is common sense. But let's start with some step-by-steps, the registration process. That's the starting point for all things private provider. Here in Miami, all firms must be registered with us before doing business. We do not charge anything for registration. Currently, we have 24 firms registered with us. That number has been growing for the last few years. Not all 24 are highly active, but we have 24 nonetheless. I think the bulk of it is handled by about half that number. We accept first-time registrations at any time during the year, but we do require renewals annually, and that is done in the month of March, which we just ended. If you have not done so, some of the people in this call, please be sure to finish your registration because they became delinquent on April 1st, which is important because failure to renew on time will result in a hold being placed on all new submittals, all new projects. The registration process requires a few official city forms, but mostly a lot of supplemental information, such as resumes, driver licenses. We must enforce the local business tax requirements of Miami-Dade County and the city of Miami. Those of you who we just encountered a couple of situations where you do not have a local office, cannot get a local business tax in the normal process because you don't have The local office cannot get a certificate of use. You can still get a local business tax receipt. It just requires a special process. We do enforce that. Your documents are carefully reviewed for accuracy and completeness. We see a lot of mistakes, omissions. They're very common. And I have to say that that's the main cause for delays. If it weren't for that, we could get the process done in 2 or 3, 4 days. Sometimes it drags on for months simply because we don't get the information that we're asking for. Everything is verified and validated. Licenses, your qualifications, we check DBPR, check your insurance. Speaking of insurance, your certificate must be sent directly by the insurance agent at the time of registration. I know some jurisdictions require that the COI with every project. We don't do that. But we do require that any changes or renewals to your policy that we're kept informed periodically. Anytime your policy is renewed, we have to have the new policy sent by the agent, etc. Again, on the topic of insurance, I believe most of you know that there are statutory limits on the insurance. Basically, you have 2 minimums. If you are doing smaller projects, $5 million or less in construction cost, you require $1 million in coverage per occurrence and $2 million in the aggregate. That's the lower limit. If you double that to 2 million, 4 million, you're not limited into the size of project you can handle. That's straight out of the statute. When you're done preparing your information, you email or physically send it, but email would be to the same private provider address. If you mail it to us or courier, FedEx, whatever, send it to us at the 444 Southwest 2nd Avenue address on your screen. Please be sure to mention the quality control section to the attention of. Now, let's move beyond registration and discuss some important principles. Before I go much further here, let me say, I believe again, that most of this information is covered on other documents, such as our private provider acknowledgement. Many of the forms and documents we have are self-explanatory. They don't require much commentary. But again, let me reinforce the concept that we're striving very hard to do everything with common sense. We want to know, in the registration, for example, we want to know who you are. We want to know that you're qualified. We want to know that your insurance is up to date. These are common sense requirements. And so we carry that through to everything that we're going to tell you today. Some general concepts here. Here in Miami, we do not allow plan review only by the private provider. You're either going to do inspections only or the full service, plan review and inspections. We insist that only our official City of Miami forms are used for plan review purposes, inspections, and so forth. We want the official forms used, and they cannot be altered. We want you, the private providers, to ensure that all work on the project that you're involved with has a valid permit. If unpermitted construction work is observed, you need to notify us at once. On the same theme, inspections shall not be done until the proper permits are obtained. Let's try this one more time in a different way, just to show you that we are very serious on this. Private provider or duly authorized rep knowingly conducting inspections without the requisite permits shall be treated as aiding illegal construction and may be referred to the respective professional board for disciplinary review. Private provider is responsible for making sure that special inspectors, including threshold inspectors, are doing what they're supposed to do, that they have inspected all construction under their responsibility and are maintaining the proper inspection records. And obviously, any safety issues that you find need to be reported to the building official at once. This is something we feel is very important. We looking at the concept of continuity. For example, the entire project be handled either by the city entirely or by a private provider. For example, if plan reviews are started by the city, by us, we will continue to do the plan reviews until the end of the project. That's all the way to the COO. So that would include all revisions and shop drawings. If we start, we finish. Conversely, if the plan reviews are started privately, then the provider will continue to the end. If, which we often see, private provider drops out, we do see changes to the construction team all the time. Architects, engineers, contractors, there's a change of architect and contractor process, but the private providers can also change, and we see that. For whatever reason, some are terminated, some back out voluntarily. Sometimes the owner just changes their mind. Well, if that occurs, the owner must find a replacement private provider. If that's not possible, if that's not in the cards, then the city, if the reviews revert to us, then we will start from the beginning, meaning we will not accept an affidavit that shows partial approval on anything. It's either going to be all city or all private provider. On the inspection side, if the inspections are started by the private provider, the city will not take over inspections. The owner must find a replacement private provider. Again, the focus here is on continuity and no sharing of responsibilities. Let's talk about changing the private provider during plan review. The owner may find another provider to take over full responsibility. We'll need a new NTBO, new affidavits. There's no sharing of responsibility between the original provider A and the newcomer provider B. We don't allow that. The owner, of course, may opt for plan review by the city. We will need the affidavits that they've been produced. They will be voided, and the city will re-review the plans from the beginning, as I stated earlier. Let's talk about changing the private provider during inspections. There's two forms to this. If the provider has full service, that is review and inspections, here's how it goes. If construction has commenced and there are no pending deferred submittals, then the new provider may take over for inspections only at the discretion of the building official. If, however, deferred submittals, that is shop drawings, are still pending, the new private provider must provide plan review services for the entire project from the beginning. In either case, we need new documents. That will be the NTBO, we call it the A1, the corresponding A2 and A3, which is a change of private provider services. We'll get more into the forms later in the presentation. Now, the other side of that coin, changing the private provider during inspections when it's an inspections only project. If construction commenced, the owner must find another provider to take over and assume responsibility for all inspections completed. Get a new NTBO. If construction has not commenced, the city may take over the inspection roles from the provider at the discretion, again, of the building official. Any fee credits that were made or issued must be returned to us. Again, in either case, we need new documents to officialize that change. I mentioned fee credits. There are mandatory credits, statutory, that the jurisdiction must issue and a private provider is used. In the city of Miami, they are calculated based on the building line item portion of the total fee. That is, we don't give a credit based on including anything on solid waste fee or impact fees, anything of the kind. It's based on the billing line item only. And here's how we do it. If it's full service, we reduce the fee by 1/3. If it's inspections only, then we'll take half of that. It's reduced by 1/2 of that 1/3. On the positive side, although we're allowed to charge an administrative fee for private provider involvement, we do not do so. So that's one little Benny. Quick, very few words about phased permits. The phased permits, as we operate here, are based on Florida Building Code 10513. There are some differences. It's not strictly in accordance or as lenient as allowed there. The phase permits are issued at the sole discretion of the building official. Important to understand, phase permits, as we do it here, are not for fast tracking a project, meaning your master plans must be completed and meet the standard of care imposed by your professional board. Your private providers, all of you here, must fully review the plans, we're talking the master, and provide affidavits for the approved disciplines, those that have been approved. If you have not approved a portion of it, then we need the rejection comments for those disciplines that have been disapproved. Process requires the applicant request a meeting with the building official to discuss the specifics. And at that point, the building official will review all pertinent data and either will approve or deny the request for going phase. Now, it's a complex subject. This was only a brief overview of the concept. Any further details are basically the subject for a different presentation. But a lot of you here have already been involved, and you know that it's a process. All right, the next topic we'll talk about is the private provider election. As it applies to private providers, it simply means that the owner opts to use or chooses to use a private provider. This is the statute. It says the fee owner of a building or structure or the fee owner's contractor, upon written authorization, may choose to use a private provider, etc. But it doesn't mention anything about lessee. Can a lessee hire the private provider? Well, naturally, yes, they can. But we have a special form now that is a catch-all. It's universal. It allows the owner's contractor. There's provision for the lessee's contractor. All those criteria, those scenarios will be accommodated in the new form A5, which again, we will talk about forms later on in today's presentation. Once again, back to the same statute. Talks about timing. When do we need to see or receive the notice to building official? Well, the statute reads as follows. Fee owner or the fee owner's contractor shall notify the local building official in writing at the time of permit application or by 2 p.m. local time, 2 business days before the first scheduled inspection. So which is it? That one sentence gives us 2 different points in time. Well, here's how it works. We need to have the NTBO at the time of permit application if there are plan review services being offered, obviously. We can wait until later for inspections only. Statute says 2 days before the first scheduled inspection. However, that's quite problematic for us. We strongly prefer that it be done before the permit is issued, um, so that any fee credits can be adjusted properly without refunds and such. Um, Ideally, we need to have the NTBO not later than the last plan review cycle. Now, this next graphic may be a bit shocking, so brace yourselves. It's really not as bad as it looks. All it is a graphic indication of the timing of the NTBO. Top half of this represents full services. Bottom half represents inspections only. If we get an NTBO, statute says it can be during the construction period right there. We want it here at this point so that we don't have to make the awkward adjustments in fees over here. For plan review and inspections, we need the NTBO as per statute at the beginning. And that is done. There are 2 steps to that. The applicant within our iBuild permitting system will make that request, and simultaneously we'll send the NTBO to that email address to ensure that it's routed properly. Okay, the next segment here, we'll talk about the various requirements for plan review responsibilities. As you all know, we are now working electronically. For the last 5 years, we've been offering plan reviews through our e-plan system. Although we are electronic, we still do accept submittals from the applicant in paper format. They are converted by a vendor, digitized and sent to us, but we do have the original submittal in 2 forms. The electronic way is described here. If PDF files are submitted, that is uploaded, then all signatures, seals, and approval stamps must be derived from PKI-based digital certificates. We expect the private provider to ensure that is done. More on that in coming moments. In the other method, if the applicant is submitting hard copies, that is, the hard copies are coming out of the design professional's office. They must go to a vendor to be scanned for e-plan purposes. But those are the plans that you will be reviewing. If you're reviewing hard copy plans submitted to your office, then you have to verify that all signatures, seals, and approval stamps are applied manually. That's your responsibility. Because there cannot be any mix and match on the same document. We can't have digital signatures and handwritten digital, it doesn't work. Important to state right here that all drawing pages must be signed by the individual reviewer who reviewed the plans, either the private provider themselves or their agent, the duly authorized representative. And that all drawing pages submitted to us must be stamped with this information that I'm about to show. Now, a word about these quotation marks. I'm using the word stamped in quotations for a reason that you're about to see in the upcoming slides. We want drawing pages stamped with something that looks like this. This is just a sample. It does not have to resemble this exactly, but the information that I'm going to show you needs to be there. We want the firm identification. You put your address and phone number if you like. We want to have the language that says reviewed for code compliance. That is in the Florida Building Code. We're simply adding the following words: reviewed for code compliance in accordance with section 553.791. We need to have the reviewer identified on that stamp. If it's a physical signature, they'll sign here with name and signature. If it's a digital signature, it'll look like that. And finally, the feature that we're looking for is this language. Now, you engineers and architects will recognize that because the Board of Engineers requires that same language on your digital seal. It says printed copies of this document are not considered approved, and the signature stamp must be verified on any electronic copies. We highly recommend that because there's still a lot of confusion that someone has in hand a printed copy of a previously digitally signed document or drawing, and they're thinking it's original and secured. It's not. Once you print it, there goes any validity of a digital signature. Now, an important thing that we would like for you to check for is the city, when we approve drawings and issue for permit, we put what we call the batch stamp. That is, this seal image is applied in a batch to all the drawings at the same time. This needs to be applied to every drawing at the top right. Our system requires a blank area at the top of all drawing pages. And when we receive them without, this stamp will obliterate any information in the title block. Therefore, we need to have this feature on all plans. You must enforce that before it comes to us. There are requirements as to size and location, depends on the sheet format. Smaller pages, say a letter size, will only require a 2" by 2". Larger sheets will require 4.5" by 4.5". So please check for that. Make sure that they have that before you approve any drawings. So do not approve drawings missing the blank area for the batch stamp. Once again, digital signatures. This is critically important and sometimes poorly understood. Let's look at the board rules. Again, we're using the engineers. Architects are similar. Engineers talk about how and where to use a digital signature. Please note, this is about digital signatures, which is not the same as an electronic signature. We require digital signatures in the city of Miami. So what it says is that the engineer shall have their identity authenticated by a certification authority and shall assure that the digital signature is unique to the person using it, capable of verification, under the sole control of the person using it, and here's a pain point, linked to a document in such a manner that the digital signature and correspondingly the document is invalidated if any data in the document is changed. We see that all the time, that approval stamps or shop drawing stamps are applied as an image, and of course that does invalidate the digital signature. Now, in the image you see on the screen right now, this is a drawing executed physically. They have the physical seal put on there by the delegated engineer. This is a shop drawing, by the way. And you're going to have several, as many as 3, maybe more, subsequent stamps put on that drawing. Works fine in paper. When we're talking about a digitally signed and sealed document here, you cannot put your typical ink stamp on that paper, even on the PDF. It has to be a digital signature itself. And so the key here is to avoid invalidating this by creating all your stamps from digital signatures. Again, that is not well understood in concept. It's a little counterintuitive. We hear complaints and, protests. Well, I'm not signing it. I'm not the architect. I'm not the engineer. I'm not going to put my seal on there. Well, no, you're not putting your seal on there. Let me show you with this graphic, really the concept as simple as I can make it, if you'll bear with me. In the digital signature world, you, Mr. Engineer, Ms. Architect, you've got to contact one of these companies here, the certificate authorities, to get your digital signature. After vetting you, they figure out that you are who you say you are. And you go through that process, pay your fee, select whatever plan you want to pay for. You'll probably get something like this. We see that a lot on the drawings that we get. Well, anything that looks like that does not comply with your board rules for engineers, for architects. It just is not usable for submitting plans. What you need to do is convert that to look like this or like this. Both of them are equally acceptable by your boards. What's the difference between this and this? Well, this does not have a license number, does not state that this person is a professional engineer, and so forth. That's what you need to do. You need to put that information on there. Or an alternative, you can simply forego the extra writing and just put an image of your actual seal. Either of these two are acceptable. This is not. So how do you get from here to there? You've got to take the raw digital signature, modify it, edit it in a program such as Bluebeam, and there's a process for that. And that is a required step to get to this part here. That is essential. That is what every engineer or architect of record must do to be in compliance with digitally submitted documents, sealed documents. You could even redesign it in this way. As long as the features are there, it's perfectly fine. So there's a process to get from here to there. And what you've done is you've taken that, modified it, and save as this, or this, or even this. Well, that process of save as, do the same process and modify that to look like your approval stamp. It's got to have these features on there. It's still a digital signature, and digital signatures apply to the drawing after it's originally sealed and signed will not invalidate that. So that's the concept to avoid invalidating a digital signature. We still have people doing that, not understanding. There are some tutorials that are available to explain that in detail, but let's not stop here. If we can get to this part here for the private provider approval stamp, as described earlier, you can certainly get to that and create a shop drawing review stamp. So again, it's a process of editing and morphing that image into either seals to be used as signing and sealing a document, or stamps to be applied subsequently. They're all digital signatures. And ladies and gentlemen, that's the best I know how to explain this. We will put links to various tutorials. And again, why am I showing this? Is because you, the private providers, need to be armed with information on what is expected here. We don't want rejections. We want to minimize, we want to avoid the unnecessary objections. Please take a look at the drawings you're getting and ensure that they're following this, okay? All right, something that bears a little bit of explanation and maybe some reinforcement. Plan review affidavits must be received at the City of Miami here, not later than the second review cycle. Now, we understand that private providers often want their plans reviewed or the plans reviewed by other departments such as Public Works, Fire, Zoning, outside agencies such as Durham, etc. They want them reviewed and pick up comments before issuing the plan compliance affidavits. Under that theory, you get to wait until all potential defects are captured and the plans are corrected before reviewing plans. You want that prerequisite. Well, let's point out, let's remember that the private provider's responsibility is limited to these disciplines here: building, structural, roofing, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. That is Florida Building Code items, right? Plans should be reviewed for those disciplines only. Now, it's the design professionals that must carry the burden of satisfying all disciplines, not the private providers. Now, that may still not be to your liking, but let's take a look at what the legal requirement is. Again, back to the statute. It tells us what a properly completed permit application is. 4 tests. Plans reviewed by the private provider, which means stamped. We need an affidavit from the private provider, fees to be paid, and here we go. We need documents that determine that demonstrate that the fee owner has secured all other government approvals required by law. So right there, that tells us we need your affidavits at the beginning. We are going to the second review cycle because, again, little common sense here, we're accommodating, but we will not go beyond the second cycle. If we don't receive them by the second, then your plans will be put on hold status. Some other tips: do not approve drawings labeled not for construction or with any other phrase conveying the same meaning, that they're not really ready for review. They are ready for review. That's why they were submitted to you. Do not approve drawings labeled with for reference only. That's commonly abused, unless the drawings serve as a key plan, identifying the location of the proposed work, or they provide contextual information, such as relating a shop drawing to a master plan, or to indicate that a portion of the proposed work was previously approved. Any other reason, please do not approve drawings that indicate for reference only. It's abused all the time. Let's talk inspections. By statute, provider must notify the building department of the date and approximate time of all inspections. Well, approximate time, we're good with AM and PM. That's probably good enough for us, but to do so, we must have inspections scheduled in our city's permitting platform, which is called iBuild. That is what we consider notifying us. Just schedule the inspection, and that will satisfy that requirement. Inspection reports must be kept at the job site and organized in a 3-ring binder. Key thing here is that our inspector must be able to review those reports at any given time. We can't be going to the job site and ask for the inspection reports and say, well, the contractor has them in his office, or we sent them out to copy, or we can't find them. No. If city inspector goes there, we must be able to see the inspection log at that moment. The private provider must ensure that no foundation work is approved before setbacks have been approved. And we have to account for partial setbacks also. So again, be aware that your foundations, we certainly don't want the project to go ahead with foundations encroaching. So we need the setback inspection to be approved first. We're talking about inspections and reports, and we did say that we want the official City of Miami forms used only. This is a significant change this time versus last year. We have new forms this year. We are going to insist that our report form be used. Now, we did say no modifications, but there's an exception. We're giving an open field in here for you, the prime provider, to put in whatever company logo or information you choose. That will allow you to customize it with any way you want, but only in this field highlighted in yellow. The forms can be filled out manually or as a fillable PDF. And again, they must be maintained on the job site at all times. Quick word about remote virtual inspections. Well, there is no logbook on site for virtual inspections, so instead what we need is the individual reports to be digitally signed by the provider and sent daily to this address, progressinspections@mymagov.com. So that is how we would handle virtual inspections. We're doing with time. About 15 minutes. Moving on to the field book, our log of approved inspections. Call it what you want, call it inspection log, logbook, inspection record, what have you. Very simple. Very simple. We want that the inspection reports be organized by discipline. That's required on every job except the very, very smallest of jobs. I mean, we need to have them organized by discipline. They must be signed, dated, and numbered sequentially. They need to be tabbed in a binder. They need to be organized, and we will check for that. It's to your benefit to keep everything organized so that we don't start wondering, hey, where is inspection 62? You're jumping from 61 to 64. Well, by being organized, you avoid those sorts of questions. It's really to your benefit as well. In order to start closing out the process, there is a C2 form. It's been renamed. We call it the trade closeout affidavit, meaning that at some point in time as the job completes, you're going to close out all the mechanical so that it can be closed in our permitting system. We need a summary report, which is this trade closeout affidavit. With that, our inspector will close it out in our system per trade. And this is pretty much a visual of how it would look in practice. The objective here is to final out everything in our system in a logical manner, efficiently. At the end, when the job is pretty much complete, there is a separate form, which is a request for a certificate of compliance, or in some cases, a temporary CO. There's forms for everything, essentially. So that's part of the management system. When properly used, they work beautifully. If they're misunderstood or misused, it just adds to the confusion. So I urge you, let's start using the forms properly. Our inspectors will assist in any way that we can to help you understand everything. In case I haven't made the point, yes, we do have a lot of documentation. There are many standard forms that we use. It's not just for the sake of proliferation. They all have a purpose. Why are we using standard forms? And why are we insisting on that? Very simple. Helps to comply with all the laws and regulations. Some forms are required by statute. Others we're allowed to use or to impose on you. And simply for routine procedures, standardizing is always useful. To be consistent and uniform. It's easier for your offices to prepare consistently and for us to review. Tends to reduce errors when you have standardized forms. And lastly, for the official records, that is something people don't normally think of, but any public record request when they're looking for a particular inspection report, the way that's done is it's a visual search. If we know what a report looks like, it helps us to find certain types of documents. But what are the documents? We have basically 4 different categories. Here's how they stack up. We have the registration documents, only a couple of them. We call it the R series. We have documents to use for election. It's the A series. It includes the NTBO, the personnel directory, a potential change of private provider, an acknowledgement form, and the authorization form for a fee owner to allow a contractor, for example, to hire the private provider. So that A series has expanded this year. We have the plan review series, the B series. You're all familiar with the log. And then the inspections require the C and D series forms. I certainly will not have any time nor inclination to go through each form, but let's take a look at this one because this one is a significant change this year. Historically, the NTBO, even the original form that came out of the Building Commission, never allowed for the private provider to sign anywhere on it. We found that has proven to be problematic. We've even seen some cases where we get an NTBO stating that private provider incorporated is going to be doing inspections only. We process the form. Turns out private provider incorporated never even heard about this. Maybe it was a ploy just to get reduced fees. We don't know, but we think it's important for that. And also another practical reason for the private provider to sign the NTBO. And the other, probably more important reason is we would like more control given to the provider's office to execute these forms. Right now, they're left up to the devices of an owner, sometimes an expediter who doesn't have much experience with the private provider forms. We think that by having you sign the NTBO, you'll have better control on getting an accurate form. So please be aware of that. About the quality control section, that's my group. Quality control section, we manage all aspects of the private provider program. Our current staff consists of a diverse group of specialists. We have permit technicians, plan examiners, inspectors, technical writers. We even have attorneys on board. We vigorously enforce infractions such as document fraud. We don't condone unpermitted construction activity, professional negligence. We see that a lot. We see notary fraud, inexcusable with that one. And licensing violations too. Those, we report all of the above to the appropriate authorities. I can't tell you exactly how many cases we have open with the Board of Engineers or Board of Architects. It's many. It's many. And it's something that we feel is important to do, even though it's extremely time consuming. It takes a lot to build a case against an architect and engineer, but we're committed to doing exactly that. Please be aware, we do not apply the standards only to the private providers. We look at design professionals of record. We look at their office personnel, expediters, notaries, all of them. From time to time, you'll see a bulletin issued. Chances are the quality control section had a hand in that. They're on the website. This may be redundant, but we take a look at everything from the standpoint of ethics. We look carefully at unpermitted construction, falsified or fraudulent documents, unlicensed activity that happens all the time. Why do you need to know that? Well, if you know of any of the above, you should report them to us. We will pursue actions with DBPR and the appropriate authorities anytime that they occur. So we need your assistance on that, please. You might be wondering how the quality assurance relates to documents. There's a common misconception here. We do not re-review your plans. We do not re-review the documents. We process everything. They're processed in a very strict way. We check all paperwork. We verify licensing status of the person signing and sealing, and we ensure that everyone who signs off on a particular discipline is in fact qualified to do that. We take a look, we see, for example, electrical engineers signing off on structural. We take a look, we ask, it's not something that is good practice. And we use common sense whenever possible. Drawings and documents are checked carefully for completeness and accuracy during the pre-screen process and by the quality control plan examiners. Please note that the NTBO is considered official only when cleared in the PP acceptance review. That consists of an actual plan examiner. We take a look very carefully at the people signing the NTBO. Oftentimes we have people signing that have no authority to represent that corporation. We verify that through SunBiz. Sometimes we have a delay in approving that because it's not verifiable. In such a case, we ask that we get something like a power of attorney or some other document that will assure us that the person signing the NTBO is authorized to do that. All of you who've done business here have struggled with the log of approved inspection, the so-called B log. Well, we carefully compare that. I say carefully. We carefully compare that with all drawing pages. What that is, it's a listing of the drawings you say are approved. What would happen if you say that drawing A101 dated September 1st is what you approved? That's what's on your log. But the drawing we get, the 101, was a later date, October 1st. That happens a lot. So what we're seeing there is that someone pulled a switch on you. And you did not review the latest document. That's why we have to be assured that your log matches the actual drawing date. If the log is incorrect, then it has to be updated to the new date on the drawing. That information does cause a lot of delays and rejections. If there's one improvement that can be made on your side, I would say, let's please verify that all the T's are crossed, all the I's are dotted on the log, and make sure that it matches 100% down to the delta what's happening in the actual drawing set. Audits. Plans are audited all the time, constantly. It's an ongoing process here at the city. I would say in the last year, we probably audited close to 100 different plans. But please realize that most audits do not result in any actions taken by us. And we don't necessarily formally notify you that we've done an audit. It's an internal process that we verify. Again, the common sense approach here is that we are tasked with enforcing building safety. That's the primary consideration. We want to make sure that, if something is not done properly, it be corrected. And so our primary consideration is building safety, the safety of our residents. We do have an ongoing audit process. Um, Occasionally, we do ask you to come in and talk to us about why you missed so many defects on the plans. That process is not intended for any other purpose except to improve all of us. So that's where we're at right now with audits. Um, there's another quality assurance measure we take in the field. It's simply going to field checks. We do send inspectors on a random basis to the field. The main reason is to check the log, make sure that their log is there and up to date. When we visit the site, the practical purpose there, other than quality assurance, is that we've got to record your approved inspections in our system. If that's not done, you run the risk of the permit expiring for lack of visible progress. That has happened many, many times. So please be aware of that we do need to go there, if for no other purpose as to keep the job current in our system. Of course, field checks, for the reasons stated, may sometimes lead to an occasional inspection audit. Whatever we find over there in terms of defective construction must be corrected. There's no negotiation on that. If it's wrong, it's wrong. You have to fix it. Simple. I can tell that I'm running way long right now, so I think this part is overdue. We're going to close out with maybe some helpful do's and don'ts. Start with the negatives. Don't approve plans with defective title block information. Don't approve plans labeled not for construction. Don't conduct inspections until the permit is issued. Do not allow construction or installation of any work until it is fully permitted. Do not take on work that exceeds the limits of your insurance policy. If you do, increase your limits. Don't take liberties with signatures. We see falsified signatures all the time. And don't promise clients that they're guaranteed to get a phase permit. There is no guarantee for a phase permit. On the positive side, do keep your registration up to date. Do accurately fill out all your paperwork. Do coach your expediters and provide support, even to those not on your staff. Do follow ethical guidelines. Do hire employees, not independent contractors. That's a statutory requirement. Do pre-screen your plans. Do work within your own expertise. Engineers, architects, plan examiners, inspectors, please remember that one. Do know that your plans may be audited. Do keep the inspection log on site and current. Finally, schedule all inspections through iBuild. So we're nearing the very, very end. There's no way that we can cover everything in one presentation. I find that we had to cram a lot of things into the time available, and we still went over. But we do have a separate resource page for you. There will be a link to that in the chat. Amy, I think we're handling the links, aren't we? Good. So here we are. Thank you again for joining us today. And we'd like to remind you that, excuse me. We'd like to remind you that we have a newsletter that we issued. So subscribe to our quarterly newsletter. This is how you do it. Just send an email to p2news@miamigov.com. You'll find a lot of useful information in here. And we want to use this as a means of communication, letting you know what we're doing and possibly some two-way on that also. Let us know how you're doing and what you want to see. Getting at the very end, I failed earlier to give you my personal email, but if you need to contact me personally for any non-business matter, that would otherwise be handled by private provider at miamigov.com. My personal is jporphyry@miamigov.com. Drop me a line, let us know how we're doing, good or bad, and we'll use this remaining few minutes to take some questions. Again, type your question if you haven't done so already, or raise your hand. Okay, so how do we do in the chat? Okay, I see a question can be over the top. Okay, sorry, ladies and gentlemen, a little glitch here in the broadcast studio. Good morning. 2 questions. Will you provide a copy of the slide deck and a list of the attendees, please? We are recording this, and we may turn it into a PDF as well. Next question. Okay. Ricardo, how is the city going to handle the new state regulations for private provider and authority having jurisdiction under House Bill 267? Good question. We have a meeting scheduled actually today internally to discuss that. We know there's going to be some changes, but that's not going to be taking effect until January of 2025. All right, can the private provider digitally sign the plans for all duly authorized reps? No, we want to clarify. We clarified that today. The plans must be signed by the person who actually did the review. If the private provider did the review personally, great. Sign the plans. If a duly authorized rep was used, we want that person to sign the plans. Ricardo, again, when will the new forms go into effect? Is there a 30-day grace period to allow? Fine. No, we don't intend to disrupt ongoing projects. All new submittals, new NTBOs, new projects with inspection reports, it'll be phased in that way. We don't want you to just change horses right in the middle of a project. No. Good question. Thank you. I do not understand this next question. How successful are your cases? What are your results? And can we get a copy or find a copy of your reports? If you're referring to, sir, are you referring to complaints to the DBPR? Is Charles there? Okay, moving on to next question. How will the city handle the private provider reporting non-compliant activities? Please provide documentation of process and timelines for city responses. Again, a clarification on that question. Are we talking about the person who is the subject of our complaint? Are you asking?
Sure, John. Yeah, this is Rick Bermudez from ARC.
Ricardo, please explain that question again, please.
Sure, absolutely. If we find work being done without a permit, or we find that signatures have been falsified, how quickly will the city be able to react so that we can, force compliance and make sure that the jobs aren't slowed down by,
Okay,
waiting weeks
Right.
and weeks and weeks for a response. Thank you.
well, look, some common sense approach again. If you see something that is unlicensed activity, if you see something that's maybe a falsified plan and it's in your hands, just some things can be rectified with a quick phone call. Just call, hey, Mr. Architect, is that really your signature on there? Ask it right there. If you suspect intentional fraud, then you report to us and we will take a look at it and see if if it warrants any formal action. Keep in mind, building a case is extremely time consuming against architects, against engineers, but make no mistake, we have staff dedicated to doing exactly that. We do it all the time, but we're not going to do it for the slightest of infractions. If they're accidental, that's a big determining factor. So if you see something that's very serious, let us know, and the timing, we'll jump on it immediately. We have to prepare the case, prepare supporting documentation, and then the board that rules, whether it's the engineers, architects, contractors, they'll come back with a request for maybe supplemental information. And we have to go and dig in deep and give them what they're looking for. Again, it's a long process, but we will act upon it quickly.
Understood.
Does that answer your question, Rick?
Sure does.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Jordan, your hand is up. Would you like to ask a question?
Yes, I'm here with Rube. He'd like to ask a question.
Oh, that's Amanda.
Yes.
John, can you hear me?
I can. Who's speaking? Roop, is that you?
This is Rob, John.
Okay, yeah. Speak a little more clearly so that we can all hear.
Yeah, John, we are all in a group together with over here with Mr. Jordan. So first I want to thank you and your staff for this wonderful seminar. We got a lot of good information. The other question is, when do you plan to have a follow-up on this?
Roop, I'm sorry. Follow up on what?
On this seminar, are you going to have a periodic or are you going to have this one time?
No, well, you were with us 2 years ago, and I'm sad to admit, but we skipped last year. So we plan to do this annually
Okay.
and perhaps even more frequently, but the midterm seminars may be a little bit different than this. This is very comprehensive. We may focus from time to time on one particular topic, for example.
Okay.
Maybe we'll focus on inspection procedures in September, October, I don't know, something like that. But a repeat of today would only be done once a year.
Okay. John, the other thing was that from the private provider qualifier point of view, what the city expect as much as when it comes to the qualifier for the private provider?
The qualifier, what is the direction of your question, Roop? You mean what responsibilities we give to or we expect from the qualifier?
Correct, right. Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, when we say the qualifier, if an engineering firm is engaged in offering engineering services, there has to be a qualifying agent, right? Some of these private provider firms in the audience today are either an engineering firm proper or an offshoot of an engineering firm. There has to be a qualifier for that firm. Similarly with architects, it gets to be different when the building official is the private provider running their own firm. That's a little bit different story, but it's nothing more than a contact person who has the prime responsibility for running the operation ethically and in accordance with state statutes and administrative rules. That's basically it. There's no special, kind of liability that we look at or anything like that, Rube.
Okay. Okay.
Okay,
And
Jordan, was that your question also?
Okay, John, I have one more last question, John.
Yes, sir.
That based based on the information you have provided to us, do you have anything or any kind of checklist, what you have come across from the contractor side by any chance?
A checklist for inspection, an inspection checklist?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's correct. That's what I'm looking for, kind. Any specific kind,
Uh,
where,
I'll tell you, we are in the process of developing various checklists right now. The ones we have
Okay.
been using in the city
yes,
were never private provider focused,
yes,
and they need updating anyway. So yes, my team is constantly doing documentation and SOPs, and it's like trying to empty a swimming pool with a teaspoon. It's very, very difficult and long
Okay.
process.
okay.
But
Okay, so-
I thank you for the question. It just reminds us of what what more needs to be done.
Yes. So thank you, John, from my side. I
You're welcome.
appreciate it.
You're welcome, Ruth.
Thank you. Okay.
Katrina, I see a chat question in the chat. For shop drawings, does the EOR need to add submittal stamp on every single plan sheet, or do they just approve the cover sheet? No, shop drawings are drawing pages. The only time we work on the cover sheet is when it's calculations, reports of that nature. No, drawing pages for shop drawings could be storefront railings. No, every page of those needs to be stamped. Jennifer, you have your hand up.
Yes, I do. Thank you, John.
Go ahead.
Hi, good morning. John, I would like for you to please provide more information on the approval signatures and plans. Is it only by the private provider? Because that's the way it was said on the last workshop. It's only required for the private provider to sign approved plans,
Okay,
not the
excellent.
duly authorized.
Yes, excellent question, and thank you for paying attention at the last workshop 2 years ago. I think we heard Luis Torres in the beginning mention the fact that the way circumstances are with how busy we are, we need to adapt. Our processes do change from time to time based on certain circumstances. What we found was working back then may not be working now. So we are currently going to insist that it's the actual reviewer that provide the approval stamp on each drawing page. This is no different than our own staff before we went electronic. Remember when the plans were being routed from one desk to another, and then the mechanical reviewer would sign their name on the mechanical drawings. The electrical reviewer would sign their name on the electrical, and so forth. We want to make sure that the actual person steps up and actually says, yes, I reviewed this plan and I say it's fine. That's quite different than the affidavit. The affidavit is being produced and prepared by the private provider, excuse me, saying that, yes, I certify this, but I did use an agent to do the actual review. So those are two different things. We want the drawings to be reviewer specific. The affidavit always has to be the private provider themselves.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Jennifer. Thank you. And then Renee Tarafa. Renee.
Hey, Mr. John, how are you doing, and everybody? You hear me?
Yes, Renee, nice to hear from you. Go
Okay.
ahead.
I have a question, and I think I already sent it about the phase permit. I have always an asking and have, very, very questions about phases with the AORs and the owners and the general contractors, because we have 3 steps. In the phase, we have foundation or vertical. And even we know, I asking for that all the responsibility is going to be for the qualifier until we get the master permit. It's get to the point that now they send the entire set and they say, no, it's only face, it's only face. And at the end, if we approve, because based on this in phase, when they come in with the 200 drawings again, they say, no, you already approved on the city, whatever. So I would like to know if you have any established guidelines, any way that you already identify or asking for the minimum drawings in building and life safety, for example, and in other disciplines about the phases and how you difference in between. I know that the footing is only up to the footing and vertical, you put there everything, but with the node, I ask in the node in the section 1 of the Florida Building Code that is going to be responsible of all the entire work for the qualifier, and if anything is wrong later, they have to fix it. But they send now 300 drawings. So I would like to know if you have any limit or you have any guideline about the phases, how you asking for. Anyway, we're going to working together. Thank you for this great workshop. Great, like always, Mr. John. Thank you. So I would like to know if you have that or you planning doing something. Can you doing something or send something about the phase and how you handling so we can working together in that? Because for me, it's a big dilemma now. Thank you.
Renee, thank you for that very, very important question. And thank you for putting me on the spot and finding a good answer.
Always you are, sir.
Yes, no, phase permits are different than they were several years ago.
Okay.
I think about a year and a half or more ago, we stopped issuing foundation-only phase permits. Now, that's not to say that we still do site improvement permits and such, things like that. But the class 1, class 2 went out the door a couple of years ago. We're only doing vertical at this point. That alone begs the question, what do we require there? Well, I would answer it this way, that the standards for review are definitely different. We probably do not want in a phase vertical the same set that are submitted for the master.
Thank you.
There are a lot of drawings in there that don't need to be there.
Thank
Now,
you.
this was especially true when we were doing foundation only. Foundation only, we definitely don't want to see cabinet details. We don't want to see reflected ceiling plans. Now, that's important for foundation permit. That's an extreme example, of course, but it's equally true with vertical phases. It can be a pared down set, but again, unless there so much is being left up to the judgment of the reviewer that it's almost unworkable. So at the risk of disclosing prematurely anything, I will say that we are taking a hard look at the phase permit process and the concept in general. But processes will change for the better.
That's correct, John.
For the better in the next, again, I'm speaking on behalf of the department, but not really because I don't have the authority to speak on behalf of the department. But I'll give you a preview. We are working very hard to make that much, much better, easier and more, a better product all around, easier for the applicant and easier for us and a more streamlined process. At the same time, holding the standards higher. That's what we're shooting for. So instead of answering your question more directly, Renee, I'm going to answer it that way. Is that all right with you?
Absolutely. Yes. If you have any future guideline or any workshop with this, entire subject, for me is very important because every time now, let's say 500, 300 drawings that say no, it's for face and come on because it's face only and we're going to be responsible. Okay, but later when they come in with the 300 or 400, 3 or 4 more drawings, they say, no, you already approved. This is
Yeah.
only master. You already approved. So we trapping in some place that you and us going to check in and say, hold on a second, what's going on? So we have to, I think, have a limit about phase at to what point, because also we have life safety, we have a lot of things that this they put together and rush them because it's, only phases. Later they come in and I have that dilemma problem. No, you already approved. So now I want to know with your people also in combination and others are going to check in and verify what we're going to see and what we're going to accept it as a phase, and don't get more than that. And later we can not coming back and say, look, all this has to be fixed. Even we put, asking for put the note is responsible of the qualifiers. Thank you, sir.
Right.
Appreciate it. And one more time,
Renee.
John, you are the best. Thank you.
John, may I make a comment?
Yes, who is speaking?
Grace.
Grace.
Grace-
Oh,
Grace
yes,
from
Grace.
Yes.
Our
So-
Grace. Yes, Grace.
Hello, John, you're 100% correct in your response. And Renee, if you want, you can go ahead and reach out to me. I know that we have a soil improvement sample packet of what we like to see when it comes to those permits. And we don't have one for the vertical phase, but maybe that's something that John, myself,
Yes.
Ron, and Louis can come up with. And then we already have that as a sample template.
Oh, okay. That can be great because
you.
we have to stop this and see and find the way that is going to be typical. And at the end, we don't put more, and later we are trapping in the it's approval. And now what we're going to do, that's great. My name is Rene Tarafa. Everybody know me, even John. And if you want, I have my email over there, so we can, any question, anything, I can help you, and we can help you with MTCI, the team. We are there. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Thank you, Renee. For the sake of time, let's move on. I think we'll take maybe 10 more minutes of questions. I know a lot of you have questions. Juan Dieguez, go ahead, Juan.
Hi, yes. Good afternoon, John. Specifically, I'd like to ask about how the private provider is supposed to provide oversight on third-party inspections like threshold and special inspections. The city wants reporting inspections that we do, and that's fine, we do that. But we're not always necessarily notified about threshold and special inspectors, so inspections. So how would you want the private provider to handle that type of situation?
Good question. Juan, we're not asking you to inspect the same thing as the threshold inspector, nor the special inspector, but when you are on site, swing by, take a look at the special inspection reports. Make sure that they're up to date. Make sure that work is not being installed without being inspected. There is an overlap of time when you guys are on the job site at the same time the special inspectors are. Make use of it.
Right.
We're certainly not asking you to duplicate their inspections. No way. It's nothing like that.
No,
Just to be aware of what they're
duplicating.
doing.
Not duplicating. My question is reporting these inspections to the city. I wouldn't know when they're pouring level 8 slab or something like that. How are these structural inspections, these threshold inspections, how do you want them to be reported to the city? Because I've had inspectors come to my job sites and they say, well, you guys haven't reported these structural inspections.
Okay.
Sometimes, or
Here's-
most of the time, they get all this information at the end. So
Okay.
how do you want us to deal with it?
Juan, yes, thanks for that. Look, here's a very quick, pointed answer to that. We see a lot of projects that go up. Nobody pulled a shoring permit. Now, that's basic. We either have a shoring permit or we don't. You need to be aware of the health of your job, of the health of what's going on. We're not asking you to, coordinate timing and scheduling and be there when they're collecting, cylinders on the concrete. Not at all. But we want to make sure that you are at least aware enough to know that there was no continuous monitoring of the lightweight concrete, to know that nobody pulled a shoring permit. Those are the kind of things that you should be able to be aware of and notify us. That's part of the verification process that, you know, we expect you to do. Okay, does that help, Juan, with the answer?
Yes, the only other
Okay.
question I have is about expediting trade reviews. What would be the process for the city, you know, pushing these along or getting them reviewed faster by the trades in the city?
Particularly shop drawings for shop.
Particularly shop drawing reviews for things like shoring or post tension.
Do you mean do you mean when you have plan review responsibilities yourselves as well?
No,
It's
no,
just a
when
question of the
the city,
affidavits. You're
when the
talking
city
about
is
when,
doing the review.
okay, so then inspections only, city review. Well, again, our staffing limits dictate the timing. You know, our staffing is what it is. We have strict task. Everyone has to work on their task list, and they have a certain number of days in which to execute a review. Sometimes we go over. We're pretty good with it, but again, it's what Lewis had mentioned earlier, that we are experiencing a high level of volume right now that makes things difficult. Sometimes things cannot get done at the speed with which people would like. We'll do the best we can. If, you know, on a case-by-case basis, if you see something is taking longer than it should, reach out to us. You know, we will do the best we can, Juan.
Okay.
Thank you. Katrina, your hand is up.
Yes, I apologize, maybe this was said before, but for the duly authorized, do they have to have, for the approval stamp, does it have to be an Identitrust or a Global Trust signature when they
They-
approve the plans, or it's just a stamp with their information? How that's a little,
If
confusing.
it's not a digital, I think maybe you might have tuned in a little bit late. If it's not a digital signature by nature, it's going to invalidate the original engineer's signature. Therefore, they have to acquire their own identity, or their own digital certificate with either Identitrust, Global Sign, Entrust, DigiCert, any of those that are third-party verified certificate authorities, PKI based.
Okay.
No
so
DocuSign. No,
So
no, no, no.
duly authorized have to get their own,
If they're going to sign the documents, yes, they do.
okay,
And I might add, it has to be their own certificate being stamped on the drawing. You
Mhm.
cannot have a generic office stamp, which was acquired by, again, I use the word stamp erroneously. I don't mean stamp. You cannot use a generic office acquired digital signature and stamp it on the drawing and say, yeah, the office is actually putting the office signature, but it was actually Joe Blow that reviewed the plans. No,
Mhm.
Joe Blow has to stamp with the signature on the plan himself.
okay,
It's that non-repudiation concept in the digital signatures. So yeah, it has to, you're gonna have to invest in some digital signatures for your staff. It's not that expensive.
okay. Thank you.
Rejections are much more expensive, Katrina.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
No problem,
thanks.
thank you.
Thank you. Abdul.
Hello.
Abdul, you have a question? Your hand is up, is it?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for a very informative workshop. We learned a lot. My question is simple. Right now, all the plan compliance affidavits are wet sign and seal. Is it can we sign digitally?
I'm going to ask you to repeat that question because I could not hear the whole thing.
So currently the plan compliance affidavit after the review is wet sign and seal, right? Can we do a digital signature for plan compliance affidavits?
Yes. Yes, you may apply a digital signature as long as all the signatures on that document are digital.
Correct. Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Now, here's another admission, if you will. Signatures, the state requires, let's put it this way. An architect or engineer of record may use a digital signature, but in the traditional sense, they're going to sign and seal physically the paper drawings, correct? I mean, we all remember those days. They were like yesterday, and they're still happening today, and I'm all for it. But physical signatures need to be original when submitted to the building department. Original means you're going to see the blue ink on the paper. Original does not mean a photocopy of somebody's signature. Now, this is a direct answer to your question, can you digitally sign the affidavit? Yes, you can. But, and I did say not to mix and match, but here's the procedure under which you can digitally sign, and it would be acceptable to me, to us here. If your duly authorized representative physically signs the document and it is physically notarized by the notary, that is ink on paper, and you know that to be a fact, and they give you a PDF to you, we think it's perfectly proper for you to digitally sign that document and submit to us. Unless it's that way, you know, in that process, that chain of, let's say, chain of authority or chain of custody, then it would not work out. Does that answer your question, Abdul?
So as soon as the authorized representative physically signed and then it's notarized, and then after that I do a digital signature, then it should be fine, correct?
You're the last one, and you would have to be the last one in line.
Yes. Yeah.
Make the PDF.
Typically, yes. Got it.
Yeah, digitally sign the PDF, and we'll go with it.
Okay. So as soon as I'm the last person, then okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, I have Nezamodi. You have your hand up. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yeah, you could call me Nez too, right here.
Okay, what's your question?
So I have actually two questions. One is that can the GC, the general contractor, call the ongoing inspection with City of Miami instead of the private provider?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But when the private provider goes, we need to be notified of when they go. If you are scheduling the inspection, it ought to be the contractor. It's actually the statute that requires the private provider to notify us. So to streamline this, we're okay if the private provider schedules it in iBuild, or if the contractor does it as they normally would, as long as there's no, as long as it's all synchronized. You know, we're not missing any visits by you. We have to know every time you go.
Got it. I mean,
What's your second question?
Is it possible to call it the day after? Because there might be a possibility that we call the private provider. Let's say inspection is at 8 o'clock in the morning, and then we call iBuild City of Miami 2. The City of Miami inspector gets there earlier than the private provider. Can we call that inspection the day after?
No, we need to know. No, negative. We need to know in advance when the private provider is going to go for their inspection.
Got it. Okay.
That's what the statute requires.
Okay, understood. And the second question was, could you please repeat the setback requirement? I didn't get that part.
Well, yes, correct. Obviously, we can't build a building closer to the property line than is allowed by zoning. A setback inspection is required unless you have Don't approve any foundation inspections unless you know that the setback has already been approved first. Simple as that.
What method can we use, sir, to show that we verified that setback? A surveyor have to do a statement, what
No.
document? No.
You would check the inspection history in our system, iBuild. It would say that the, inspection, setback inspections were approved or they weren't. If they were not approved already, sometimes you'll see the inspector on site. A building inspector would do that setback inspection. But, there are different ways of where you can ascertain what's going on. You may go on Tuesday morning to check the rebar and the foundation cut and see it's okay, but you will withhold your approval until you verify that the setback has been done. That's possible. Okay?
Okay.
All right. And we'll take about 5 more minutes of questions because we have a lot, but we're also running way over time. And it's exciting that there are so many questions, but who's next, Amy? We took care of that one.
I am here.
Renee, you have another question?
Yes, I have a couple of questions in one. Can I ask in time 1 second?
Okay. I think
one
this may be the last question for this meeting.
Thank you. Thank you.
Go ahead,
One
Renee.
is the passenger loading zone. I have every time problems because many of the AORs and the owners and contractor tell me that when we need passenger loading zone that is very directly with the ADA and the entries, and when they have parking, valet parking, so on, so they say that the City of Miami Public Work and also zoning, they don't allow to put the passenger loading zone in front of the sidewalk where they can, everything that going implied to the passenger loading zone. I would like to verify if it's the 3-department building, zoning and public work who decide that, or just only have the authority of zoning and public work. And if they don't allow it, sometimes they asking for go to the parking and provide there the passenger loading zone. So I want to verify, and very sure I probably you have to check about that. But I wanted an answer about it is true that the zoning department or the public work don't allow, in any new building with valet parking or any other regulation that asking for the passenger loading zone, that they cannot put it, in front of the building in the way that's supposed to be. That's one. And the second is about the face and about the foundation and the setback. Do we have to have in consideration the repose angle when the loading coming to the bottom of the footing, if they pass or encroach the easement or any property line? Also, we have to have in consideration, and we have to also approve a plan exam, architectural plan layout before, anything, and behind the site plan, an extra plan with all that foundation, because that can be critical, and also the calculation and the angle of repose if they're going in any easement or past the property line that you don't see because it's below the footing, the bottom of the footing. Thank you.
Renee,
Yes.
Your first question about the public works, I'm going to decline to address that because it sounds that it's project specific, and I would have to do some research with Public Works and see what's going on there. But feel free to call me or email me privately. That's fine.
Thank you.
On the second question about the foundation and the setback and the angle of repose, well, think, in your mind, where is the concrete going to reach after it's been placed, right? If the concrete encroaches, can't allow it.
Okay.
Was that a good enough answer for?
Yes.
These are very thoughtful questions, Renee. I appreciate it. Okay, with that, we're going to have to close. But I'll say that if we were not able to get to your questions, it was only because of lack of time. But feel free, please email your questions to privateprovider@miamigov.com, and we will answer them in short order. Keep in mind that we're probably going to be recovering from the time spent on this preparation of this presentation. We might take a few days to answer your question, but we'll definitely get to it. So let me thank you right now, all of you, for attending, and we'll see you next time. Stay tuned. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter. All right? Thank you all.
Thank you, John. Great presentation.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.